She pointed at him, full of attitude. "You, show me your ID." He was calm, dressed sharp, clearly out of place on a construction site, at least in her eyes. Karen thought he was some trespasser, a threat, someone who didn't belong. But what she didn't know, he wasn't just allowed there. He owned the entire company. And in less than 5 minutes, she'd be begging to keep her job. "You there, show me your ID." The voice rang out across the busy construction site like a fire alarm. Every worker paused, heads turned, and the buzzing of drills and hammers seemed to fade into a thick silence. Karen Middleton, the newly assigned site supervisor, marched across the dusty ground like she owned the entire block. Clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, she looked every bit the textbook definition of someone who let a little authority go to her head. It was only her second day on this particular site, but she'd already made it her mission to tighten things up. Her words, not anyone else's. Her eyes were locked on one man. He stood near the base of the main building under construction, watching quietly with his arms crossed, not wearing the required reflective vest or hard hat. To Karen, that was reason enough to pounce. But to others, especially those who recognized him, it was a sign that something big was about to go very, very wrong. The man she confronted was in his late 30s, well-dressed in a navy blue polo shirt with the HBA Holdings logo stitched neatly on the chest, paired with clean slacks and polished shoes. No one dressed like that at a construction site, unless they were important. But Karen didn't care. She didn't ask. She didn't notice the knowing looks on the workers' faces, or the way a few quietly stepped back, giving the confrontation some space. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, stopping just a few feet away from him. "This is an active work zone. Where's your ID badge?" The man remained calm. He didn't flinch or frown, just look her in the eyes and asked gently, "Is there a problem?" Karen's tone sharpened instantly. "Yes, there's a problem. We've got trespassers wandering around, and no one's enforcing security protocols. You can't just walk onto a job site like this." "I didn't walk onto it," the man replied. "I drove in and no one stopped me." "That's impossible," she snapped. "Our gate security is tight. There's no way you should have gotten through without clearance." She pulled out her phone and began scrolling. "I'll call them myself. I don't care who you say you are. You need a visitor badge, a vest, a hard hat, and clearance to be here." He raised an eyebrow slightly, still unfazed. "So, you're assuming I'm a visitor?" She scoffed. "What else would you be? You're clearly not part of the crew, and I don't recognize you from management. So yeah, I'm assuming you're somewhere you don't belong." Behind them, a small group of workers exchanged glances. One of them muttered, "Oh no, she has no idea." Karen continued, oblivious to the tension thickening in the air. "Look, you can either show me a valid ID and explain why you're on my site, or I'll have security escort you off immediately. I'm not going to argue." The man took a breath, then smiled, calmly, confidently. "Okay," he said. "Let's talk about who actually owns this site." Karen blinked. "Excuse me, you're right. Safety is important. So is protocol. But you're talking to the person who signs the checks for this entire operation." She froze. "What?" "I'm Malcolm Bennett, Chief Operations Officer for HBA Holdings." The name hit like a thunderclap. Karen's mouth fell open slightly, her fingers still hovering over her phone. "You what?" Malcolm nodded. "That's right. This site isn't just part of my responsibility. It's under my direct supervision. I came here today to observe, quietly, to see how things were running." Her face turned pale. Whispers rippled across the site. The workers who had stayed silent now watched with wide eyes, waiting for what would happen next. Karen tried to recover. I wasn't informed." Malcolm kept his gaze steady. "You didn't ask. You just assumed." And with that, the power dynamic flipped entirely. Karen stood frozen, the words Chief Operations Officer echoing in her head like a siren. Her grip on the clipboard tightened as she processed what had just happened. She had barked at a man who, by title alone, outranked not only her, but nearly everyone she reported to. Her jaw opened slightly as if to respond, but nothing came out. Malcolm didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gloat. That made it worse. He simply stood there, calm and collected, while her own authority crumbled around her. The crew had resumed pretending to work, but they were all watching. Even the crane operator had turned the cab slightly for a better view. Karen finally stuttered, I didn't get a memo that anyone from corporate was visiting today. Malcolm nodded slowly, eyes fixed on her. That was intentional. Sometimes the best way to assess a team is to see how they act when they don't know they're being watched. That hit her like a brick. He was auditing the site, unannounced, and she had just humiliated herself in front of him. Her tone shifted immediately. Mr. Bennett, I apologize. If I had known, but you didn't know, he interrupted. Because you assumed. She tried to regain footing. Well, sir, I was just enforcing protocol. No one should be on site without the proper gear, as per OSHA standards. Malcolm gave a subtle nod. Absolutely. Safety is critical. But enforcing rules and jumping to conclusions aren't the same thing. She shrank a little at that. I understand. Do you? He asked, still calm. Because from what I observed, you didn't stop to ask who I was. You didn't observe first or even approach with professionalism. You barked orders, demanded my ID, and assumed I didn't belong, based on nothing more than what I was wearing and, let's be honest, how I look. Karen's face flushed red. That's not what I meant, but it's what you did, Malcolm replied, voice still firm but not raised. You judged me before speaking to me. That's a dangerous trait in leadership. She looked down, eyes darting around, searching for a way out. Sir, I take full responsibility. It won't happen again. He tilted his head slightly. Good, because this isn't about just one interaction. It's about how you treat people you think are beneath you. If I'd been a regular worker, would you have talked to me with the same tone? Or worse? She said nothing. The question didn't need an answer. It was rhetorical, and they both knew it. At that moment, the site's general manager, Roger, came jogging over. He was red-faced, out of breath, and clearly panicked. Mr. Bennett, sir, I didn't know you were coming today. Malcolm gave him a firm handshake. That was the point. I wanted to see things in their natural state. Roger nodded, eyes flicking to Karen, who stood like a statue. I see you've met Karen, he said, voice uneasy. Malcolm's expression didn't change. Yes, we've spoken. I'd like to have a meeting with you both in the trailer in 15 minutes. Roger nodded again, then glanced at Karen. Of course. As Malcolm walked away, workers stepped aside respectfully, giving him a clear path. Karen remained behind, staring at the ground. For the first time in her career, she felt truly powerless. She had embarrassed herself, exposed her bias, and done it all in front of the one man who had the authority to end her job with a single sentence. The power she thought she had was nothing compared to the quiet authority Malcolm had just displayed. And now, she had 15 minutes to prepare for a meeting that could change everything. 15 minutes felt like 15 seconds as Karen sat stiffly in the trailer's cramped conference room, heart pounding behind her clipboard like a drum. Roger sat beside her, nervously tapping his fingers on the table while trying to avoid eye contact. The room, once her place of command, now felt like a courtroom, and she was on trial. The door creaked open and in walked Malcolm Bennett, calm as ever, holding a laptop in one hand and a bottled water in the other. He didn't look angry. He didn't need to. His very presence carried authority, and every step he took made Karen sink deeper into her chair. Thank you both for meeting with me, Malcolm began as he sat at the head of the table. He opened his laptop but didn't look at it. Instead, his eyes met Karen's. Before we get into anything else, I want you to know something important. I didn't come here today looking for trouble. I came to observe. I was hoping to see a team operating smoothly, professionally, and with respect across all levels. Karen nodded slightly, gripping her pen tight. Mr. Bennett, she began softly, I completely understand how badly I misjudged the situation. I reacted too quickly, and I let assumptions guide my tone. I take full responsibility. Malcolm gave a subtle nod. I appreciate the honesty. But let's talk about why this happened. Not the surface reason, the real reason. Karen blinked. Sir, let's be honest, Malcolm continued. If I had been a white man in a suit, would you have reacted the same way? Or would you have assumed I was someone important? Karen's lips parted, but nothing came out. Roger looked incredibly uncomfortable, fiddling with a pen as Malcolm continued. We've done a lot of work at HBA Holdings to create an environment of inclusion, respect, and fairness. That doesn't stop on the corporate level. It has to extend all the way to the field. That includes our supervisors, our managers, and every voice that represents this company. Karen swallowed hard. I didn't mean to, but you did, Malcolm interrupted calmly. And I want to be clear, Karen. I don't think you're a bad person, but I do think you have unchecked bias. And when bias goes unchecked in a position of power, it becomes dangerous. Today, that bias was directed at me. Tomorrow, it could be a young laborer on his first day, or a contractor unfamiliar with the site. She looked down, shame burning in her chest. She had always thought of herself as firm but fair. But the truth was hard to ignore. Her assumptions today had nothing to do with safety and everything to do with appearance. Malcolm continued. Now here's what's going to happen. I'm not firing you. Not today. Karen's head lifted slightly, surprised. But I'm putting you on a formal review. You will undergo diversity and leadership training, and we will monitor your interactions over the next 60 days. If there's any further incident of bias, mistreatment, or unprofessional behavior, your contract will be terminated without hesitation. Karen nodded slowly. Understood. Also, he added, turning to Roger, I want anonymous feedback from her team during this period. I want to know if she's truly improving, not just following the rules when she knows she's being watched. Roger nodded quickly. Absolutely, sir. Malcolm stood, closing his laptop. I didn't enjoy this conversation, but it was necessary. The best leaders are those who know how to listen, learn, and grow. Let's see if you're one of them, Karen. And with that, he walked out, quiet, firm, and leaving behind a lesson that would echo far beyond that conference room. The door shut softly behind Malcolm, but to Karen, it sounded like a slam. The silence in the trailer was heavy. Roger gave her a look, half pity, half disappointment, but said nothing. Karen sat still for a few seconds, then finally exhaled the breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She had just been called out, corrected, and humbled by the highest-ranking man she had ever spoken to face in the company. And the worst part? He had done it without yelling, without raising his voice, and without belittling her. That made the truth hit even harder. When Roger finally stood up, she spoke first. You don't have to say it, she murmured. He's right. Roger gave a slow nod. He is. I've worked here a long time, Karen. I've seen guys fired for a lot less. You should be grateful he's giving you a chance. She nodded, eyes still lowered. I am. You've always been good with logistics and schedules. But your people skills, they need work. I know, she said quietly. I just never thought I'd be that person. The one who gets called out for bias. I mean, I've never thought of myself as racist or anything like that. Roger sighed. Most people who have bias don't realize it until they're forced to see it. He paused, then added, You didn't ask who he was. You didn't even introduce yourself before demanding ID. You saw a black man who didn't fit your idea of belonging, and you reacted. That's not just a misjudgment. That's a pattern you need to break. His words, though calm, stung more than any yelling ever could. She didn't argue. How could she? Everything she had done that morning replayed in her head like a bad movie. She thought back to Malcolm's calm tone, his patience, the way he gave her room to correct herself instead of crushing her in front of the crew. He could have destroyed her career with one sentence. But instead, he gave her something else, a mirror, a chance to look at herself honestly. That night, Karen didn't sleep well. She sat at her dining table with her laptop open, searching articles on unconscious bias, workplace diversity, leadership growth, and emotional intelligence. Each click opened her eyes a little wider. She watched a video of a young black professional describing how often people questioned his presence in meetings, in offices, in neighborhoods, always assuming he was in the wrong place. It hit her hard. That's what she did to Malcolm. She didn't see a leader, a COO, a decision-maker. She just saw someone she didn't expect in a place she thought she controlled. The more she read, the more she realized how much she didn't know. For the first time in her adult life, Karen admitted something difficult. She had a lot of unlearning to do. The next morning, she arrived on site early, earlier than usual. She walked through the gate, not with authority, but with intention. She greeted every crew member she passed, asked about their day, even stopped to learn a few names she hadn't bothered remembering before. It wasn't about pretending to be nice. It was about finally showing up as the leader she thought she already was. At the morning meeting, she looked each person in the eye, thanked them for their hard work, and promised an open-door policy from that day forward. No more barking orders. No more making people feel small. Behind a stern exterior, Karen had finally begun to understand that leadership wasn't just about managing schedules and inspecting work. It was about trust, fairness, and the responsibility to treat every person with dignity, no matter who they were or what they looked like. And for once, her clipboard stayed at her side, untouched. Weeks passed, and the Westbridge site saw something unexpected. Karen, once known for her sharp tone and rigid attitude, had changed. It wasn't overnight, and it wasn't perfect, but the difference was noticeable. She no longer barked orders from a distance. She walked the site and talked to the crew with genuine interest. She asked questions. She listened. At first, workers were skeptical. Some figured she was just putting on an act to save her job. But slowly, day by day, they realized she meant it. She learned names, not just roles. She started bringing coffee for early morning teams. When one of the young electricians lost his brother in an accident, Karen was the first person to organize a donation drive on site. The shift in morale was undeniable. Even Roger admitted it during their weekly check-ins. "Whatever you're doing," he said one Thursday morning, "keep doing it." The crew's working better than ever. Karen gave a small, tired smile. "I'm not doing anything special. I'm just trying to be human." Behind the scenes, she completed every required training Malcolm had assigned and went beyond. She enrolled in a weekend leadership course focused on inclusive team management. She even started a small initiative at her site, Walk a Mile Wednesdays, where team members swapped tasks for an hour to better understand each other's roles. It boosted empathy, reduced tension, and built camaraderie. But despite the progress, one thing weighed on her heavily: Malcolm. She hadn't seen him since the meeting. His words stayed with her, a quiet voice of accountability echoing through each choice she made. She wondered if he even knew how seriously she had taken his warning. Then one Friday afternoon, 3 weeks before her probation was set to end, he returned. No clipboard, no dramatic entrance, just the same calm man in that same navy blue polo. This time, he wore a vest and a hard hat, though not because he needed to. Karen spotted him near the foundation and immediately approached. Her heart pounded again, but it wasn't fear. It was hope. "Mr. Bennett," she greeted, extending her hand. "It's good to see you again." He shook it firmly. "Karen, how's the team?" "Stronger than ever," she replied. "Thanks to the wake-up call you gave me." Malcolm studied her for a moment. "You seem different." "I am," she said. "Because of you. You didn't embarrass me that day. You gave me a chance to grow. I just hope I've done it justice." He nodded. "I've been getting feedback. Quietly. Your crew speaks highly of you now. They say you listen, that you're fair, that you care." Karen felt her eyes sting, but blinked the emotion away. "I just needed to step back and see the blind spots I didn't know I had." "That's the kind of leader we need," Malcolm said. "Not perfect, just willing to learn, to face the uncomfortable, and to lead with humility." She looked at him, amazed again at how someone with so much authority could be so grounded. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. Why didn't you just fire me that day?" Malcolm gave a small smile. "Because if I fired everyone who made a mistake, we'd never build better leaders. Accountability matters, yes, but so does opportunity. I saw someone who needed a mirror, not a pink slip." Karen laughed softly. "Well, that mirror changed everything." Malcolm placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then make sure the next person who needs one finds it in you." As he walked away, Karen stood in the afternoon sun, not as a disgraced supervisor, but as a leader reborn. Not because of punishment, but because of perspective. And the woman who once demanded ID from the man in charge now carried a new identity of her own. A leader who had earned her respect the hard way, by listening, learning, and never making the same mistake twice.